I'd love to introduce Tyler Blatt. He is a fellow InfoTruster, and he is the manager of emerging solution strategy at InfoTrust. And we're going to have him talk about success in a privacy-centric world. So here you go, Tyler. Take it away.
Thank you. Checking, am I live? Can you hear me? All right, great. So I always start with this as a little cheesy, but I gotta let you guys know. As Ash said, I make internal training videos. Most people watch them at 0.5 speed. They don't speed them up, they slow them down. I talk very fast. I also curse a lot and I'm very silly. InfoTrust knows this about me, but they still let me on stage, but they tried to hide this in my title. I'm the manager of emerging strategy solution. I'm literally a mess. I am a mess, so they're letting you know that. One of the things we heard from the previous group, and I actually just thought about this today, this wasn't originally part of the presentation, was dealing with constraints. We heard a lot about the constraints in the last, like, hey, we want, is performance and privacy at odds? No, we don't think so. How do you deal with the constraints? There's an interesting story in history, I think, of somebody that's been important in technology, not in MarTech, but technology, in dealing with constraints. Who knows about the game Doom? Who's ever heard of what Doom is? Anybody? It's a very popular game from when video games were very new. At the time, the prevailing sentiment among engineers was, we can't process 3D models. We can't do 3D. We're not ready. The processors aren't ready for 3D. And there was a developer working on Doom by the name of John Carmack that figured out some clever mathematical tricks to show a 2D game in 3 dimensions. And it was the first game that was 3D and it blew up and everyone's this crazy. These computers and on a Nintendo Entertainment System were looking at 3D and it was such a big deal. Those of you that are aware of who John Carmack is know that he went on to create the Oculus Rift. So that same math techniques, that same looking at the obstacles of what's technically possible, by looking at the constraints, was able to overcome them and break through with technology. We don't need to look at constraints as a problem. We need to look at something to come over that'll separate ourselves, and that's the path to developing really cool technical solutions. So it's just a quick little thing to think about. We don't need to look at these changes on what privacy is a good thing, and overcoming those constraints can be great for our business. Okay, so we're gonna do a few things today. I always like to be as educational as I can. So I'm just gonna talk about the role of identity in MarTech. Like there's a lot of going on. What happens when third-party cookie goes away? What is happening with identities? What are we doing? I just wanna very clearly and very simply state, this is what's going on and this is what we're trending to. Understanding what's going on with the industry in general, like what does that mean for my data stack? Everyone's like, what is actually going to happen when third-party cookies go away? Or if they go away with certain platforms, or if users have the option to take them away, what's happening? How is it gonna affect my business? Hopefully we'll have a really clear understanding of that. If you want to start, we saw from Ash's opening the kind of very stable bridge. We got a durable way to get to Ad Eden. What are the technologies I can start adopting that are going to help me get there? And then what's the business impact I can expect from this? Like, what is it actually going to do? I don't want to spend money going towards this durable future if there's really no returns yet. So what can I expect from adopting this technology? We'll hopefully get a clear view of all of those things. So firstly, what is identity doing in MarTech? Really, really simple start. An internet user goes to your site, they leave your site, later they see an ad, the ad gets their interest, they come back. It's retargeting, that's what we all know. The only way that this works is when we go to show them the ad, we know who they are. Do we understand the identity? Now you can replace this retargeting example with a number of other examples that identity is helping us understand. Did we get an email? I know how to reach you. Do I have a third-party cookie that's identifying you, which we'll talk about in a couple slides? Am I able to know your interest for search ads? Like even the idea that search maybe isn't necessarily a one-to-one thing all the time, but how do I know what my users' interests are? How do I gather the identities of people and know what information I have about them? So everything we're gonna talk about in like all the constraints from the panel we just talked about, everything we're talking about with third-party cookies and what's going on, any real changes going in the industry are all surrounding how we think about identity. At the end of the day, we're like, do I know who you are? Do I know whether you give me consent? Do I know what your interests are? Do I know how I can talk to you? It's all surrounding identity. So here's a really simple look at what is going on with third-party cookies and what does this actually mean. So I don't see a lot of people clearly explaining what this change means, and I like to give reasons why these things exist. So if I go to Netflix and I log into Netflix, and then I come back to Netflix the next day, do I have to log in again? No, you don't want to log in. What if I go to the next page? So we were talking about the internet is very, you go to the next page, and it should be a seamless experience. Do I want to log in between every page? No, I need some kind of technology to say, yeah, I know you're logged in. You give me your credentials, I can stay here. That's first-party cookies and it's not going away. I bank with Chase Bank. Let's replace this with Chase Bank. if I log into Chase Bank, I don't want to have to keep logging in, but then eventually log out because that's a security problem. So cookies can only live so long. Do I think Netflix should be able to read my Chase Bank cookie and log in as me? Should they be able to look at my cookie? No, that's a big security problem. There's security surrounding how we deal with cookies. So there's certain sensitivity to a cookie when I'm saying, yes, you can know this about me, you can store this information about me, you're allowed to have this, but don't share it with anybody. That's really what we're talking about with first-party cookies is the security around, this is a one-to-one sharing of information that you can hold about me in the browser for your website. Third-party cookies is a whole nother philosophy. Anybody can access them, anybody. So if you give me one ID, and then I leave from Chase Bank and then go to Netflix, and I golf in my spare time, not very well, but I golf, and then I go to Golf Galaxy, and then I go around to various websites. That third-party cookie can follow me around, and anybody that can read that cookie or has technology with that cookie knows everywhere I went, as I went throughout the internet. And an advertiser that's able to look at that cookie knows, okay, these are the interests, and I can show them. So this has been basically the technology that's followed us all around the internet. Everywhere we go, this is the technology, this is who this person is, this is what they've done, and this is what users don't like about it. There's not a lot of trust with that. So when you hear cookies and things going away, just know this is never going to change. It's how the internet works. It has to keep going that way. What's going to happen is we won't have this other open cookie technology that can be read by anyone. And in some cases they'll exist, some they won't. We'll get into that more. But these are the changes that we're really talking about, and it's the ability to identify someone as they go throughout the internet. And what people are often talking about when they say, okay, if this isn't going to work anymore, is durable identifiers. We'll hear that term a lot. What is a durable identifier? This is how I feel a lot of people think. People keep telling me we need durable identifiers, but I don't know what that means. But we need them, and we need them now. What does that actually mean? It's basically PII based. It's saying, okay, if this cookie technology would allow me to know who you are as I went from my bank to Netflix to Golf Galaxy, well, my email tends to follow me around. My address tends to follow me around. Certain pieces about who I am tends to follow me around. And there's a reasonable fidelity to say, yeah, this is that person and I can understand them. What we're really searching for in all these decisions is an identity that when an advertising party or a data sharing party or really any party involved in understanding the data can say, yep, we can all agree this is who this is. And with the technology of cookies, in some cases going away, in some cases not, we need to then rely on, for the users where we don't have that ability anymore, what are the things that we can now do to identify them? And that's where you're hearing about durable identities. That's where you're seeing like PII-based things. So you heard from TurboTax doing customer match. Customer match is a PII-based durable identity way to know who users are. So in that case for TurboTax, to see those large returns, they said, hey, what if we didn't rely on this technology that doesn't have a high fidelity on certain browsers, certain audiences? And we said, hey, what are the ones that do? What are the ones that work? We have these emails. If we hash them and share them, we're going to be able to target people a little better. That's where a lot of that's coming from, and you'll hear more of that later. Okay, so that's the identity part of this and just understanding where identity fits in this, and that's kind of that shift. One of the other things I'll say before I move on, we heard a little bit of this from Marty before. When Marty talked about CRMs kind of being this one place, you have this old style of direct marketing and then you have paid and they're converging. That identity switch was exactly what he's talking about. It's the idea that we have these identities that used to be only useful over here, and then these other powerful identities that were useful over here, and now we're seeing those worlds converge. And that's where you'll see technologies like CDPs get stronger, because they're technologies that combine those two worlds. Okay, so we just heard a lot about all of this. There's really three pillars of changes going on in the industry. One, regulatory changes, so like legal. Are we even allowed to do this? Is it legal changes going on in what we're allowed to do with data? There's user expectations, which we're obviously hearing. I don't like what you're collecting about me. There's the legal is very much coming from users getting upset about what's going on. And then there's just general technology changes. Technology is constantly shifting. Is this possible anymore? Is this not possible? So all these players will affect what happens from data, but it's really kind of three different categories that are driving the changes that we're seeing within data. So this is what it's been looking like before privacy. Like a user gives an identifier, could be a third-party cookie, could be an email, it could really be anything, and then data shared with platforms, and we know who you are, and we can make decisions. Now it looks a little bit more like this. Am I even legally allowed to collect this? Is the first thing. Like you're going to be privacy first. Can I even collect this data? Then you go, well, I can collect it. Does the user want me to collect it? Do I have consent for this data? And you're like, okay, I have consent to send this to Google, but I can't send it to Meta. I have to think about consent with each individual platform. I'm really sending it to a lot of places. So yeah, where can I even send this data? And then ultimately, is the technology even going to allow me to send this data? Now you got things like ad blockers, or assuming you can legally collect it, you do have consent. This topic will come up a lot. And you're allowed to send it to them. Sometimes technology takes it upon itself to say, nope, you still can't do it, which not great for us. A lot of the big uplifts will be about checking off the first two and then getting around the third where technology can't hardly do it. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, where technology can't really interfere. But this is what it's like today. So there's a lot of barriers into looking at that. And this is really what it's doing. So we look at those changes, and it used to be we almost collect all of the data. Like 2016, everything's getting collected. What we see here with modeled is this is data that we know we collected, but we can't really collect identities. We don't know who people are. We just kind of have to fill in the blanks for what data we've collected. And we had most of our data in 2016. And then you see things like consent get very popular, GDPR, CCPA, and now we're kind of trending down, and you're seeing modeled eat into more of that data. How do you make decisions? How do you know what's going on? How do you reach out to people? So this is what's kind of creating the reality that we're living in, that we're talking about identity being so important. Do I have options for identities I can get with the growing modeled use? Like, what am I supposed to do about that? So here's where we are. And unless we're in a Google building, unless somebody comes running in with a newspaper, this is what the third-party cookie opt-out is going to look like in Chrome. We don't really know. What we know is users are going to have an informed choice. So what's going to happen is, when I log into Chrome, some level of choice is going to happen, and then I will either have third-party cookies or not. It's going to be an option. So we know it'll affect some percentage of users. What percentage that is, we don't really know yet. How cookieless are you already? Safari and Firefox do not have cookies, or third-party cookies. They have first-party cookies. So you're already somewhat cookieless. This is a general breakdown of what is happening in the industry as of 2023. So what is the market share of browsers? So between Safari and Firefox, you're already looking at somewhere around 15% of users are already operating in that. And depending on what your demographic is inside the subset, you might be even larger, to where we see 30 and 40% are already on Safari and Firefox. You might already be living somewhat in this world. It's already affecting you a little bit. And we just know this really big group is going to have some kind of small percentage that's going to come out, or large percentage that is now going to also have that technology impact. So what's that going to look like? It's a range of possibilities. So really what we're talking about is preparing for that range. But we could fall anywhere within this range. It could be as low as 25 and 35%. We're still operating with third-party cookies. We keep running marketing that way. And then we have other subset that we're going to work on more durable identifier, first-party based matching, or high adoption of that technology. Now we're 85, 95%, and you really got to lean on those durable marketing tactics. And really, we could fall anywhere in there. And right now, you're currently falling somewhere in their business. I'll stop here to say it's important to understand, prior to this change taking place in Chrome, where do you even fall on this line today? It's very important to know that, so I can say, hey, how am I communicating with the people that I do have third-party cookies with? What are the marketing tactics that I'm using in there? And how am I communicating with people where I may not have that, but I could be leaning on things like CAPI, customer match, things like that, to do more durable marketing tactics and marketing audience creation. So nothing's really changing with the strategies that we're using to think about the present and where we're going with the future. It's just how fast they're necessary. If you look at the strategies in the present, where we're already looking at 30% or more being the modeled data, we still are looking to maximize collection across that 30%. We are still looking to get some more control and ownership over our stack. This is around brand trust and also just making sure we have better data collection. And we still have to do privacy first. We need to make sure that we're following the rules. So what technologies we can adopt that are going to help us deal with the potential business loss of that, while making it easier to operate and have a better data management system, will obviously help us navigate in this world, and very much prepare us for anything coming if the model tends to trim down. So let's talk about infrastructure. So this is what it looks like today. If you're doing a client-side tag management, individual customers are communicating directly with Facebook/Meta, Google Analytics, Google Ads, and that does a couple of things. One, a customer can observe if they go in and look at the network, and there's lots of tools, literacy on privacy is going up. So they're going to go look and say, oh, this is where this, I'll just pick on target.com. Target's sending all of my data to these platforms, and then it becomes very visible and it's all open in the browser and people can learn. There's lots of tools out there to see what's happening, which lowers trust. They say, they're sending my data everywhere. Also not secure. If we have something like, there's something called piggybacking inside client tag management, which essentially says any tag can fire other tags. So if you ever look at all the tags that are firing on your website, you might only be firing 5 to 6 pixels, but they're going to 60 places and they multiply and that data gets everywhere. And you think about the privacy constraints and everything I talked about, it becomes a nightmare to think about how to deal with that. When we start adding things like email or more sensitive identifiers, this is very not secure. Everybody can see that hashed email. It's all stored on the front. It's not a secure connection. So what does this look like if we look at something like server-side, which is the durable technology I'll be talking about the most here? Inside server-side, we first have a first-party connection, which takes a minute for me to explain. Similar to my cookie explanation, I'll explain this is how the internet works, and it's a much better way to maximize your data collection. The example I tend to talk about here is Pizza Hut, just because it was born in the late 80s and it was a popular pizza place. If I go to Pizza Hut and I want to order a pizza, do you think ad blockers, Safari, Firefox, anybody's trying to stop me from talking to Pizza Hut servers? Should I be able to go to pizzahut.com and order a pizza through their website, which talks to their own servers? Nobody's trying to disrupt that. That's how the internet works. I need to be able to go to Amazon and click purchase, and they have to talk to Amazon servers so that that can continue to work. It becomes easy to manipulate that or block that if the communication's with not the website I'm on. So if I'm on pizzahut.com and they're sending data to Google Analytics, that's easy to block. If they're sending data to themselves, that's not easy to block. I can't block that without breaking the internet. What we do with server-side GTM is take the kind of a proxy approach where this data there on the right, there's a proxy between, which is our own server. It's like a web app, and that server will have a first-party domain. So I'll use InfoTrust as my example here. If the user's visiting www.infotrust.com and data is being sent to data.infotrust.com, that is a first-party connection. We're sending data directly to ourselves. Then we will forward it along to the other platforms. But what's visible on the front end is we're just communicating with ourselves. So no longer do we see lots of data going to lots of different platforms. No longer can technology play a role in stopping that. What I will say is that means the burden of consent and measuring what's going on falls on you. This is where we are sending it. This is what we were doing with this data. It's still very, I always say Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. You definitely need to make sure you're still collecting consent and you're operating within your legal guidelines, but no longer can the technology piece play a role in dropping what data you're sending. They can't say, no, you're not allowed to communicate with this. And that's where a lot of the uplift we'll talk about comes from. Also, we got BigQuery over here. This is a lot of things you'll hear from people is we send our data everywhere, but we don't own any copies of it ourselves. One of the things that's very cool about server-side GTM is drop it right over to yourself. You can essentially send data directly to yourself and own it permanently. And another cool thing about BigQuery is you can move it anywhere you want. So let's say you're working with Snowflake down the road, or you decide to go with another cloud, it's completely movable. You own it, it's a database, you can put it wherever you want. So while you're building out these records of identities and durable identifiers and everything you're trying to do from a first-party perspective, what server-side GTM allows you to do is store a copy for yourself. You own this forever, and there's many different advantages to many different data platforms. There's more data platforms than BigQuery, but one of the biggest advantages BigQuery has over other platforms is it's the cheapest to store data in by far and away. It stores it at scale. It gets cheaper to store over time. The cost actually decays the longer that it stays in. So it's incredibly efficient to just store a copy of your own data, and you'll never be in that position where you're like, hey, we lost visibility, we don't have this. It's your own and operated data. You can do what you want with it. It also sets you up to do some pretty cool stuff. This is the kind of the more advanced things inside server-side GTM, which allows you to think about how you approach users a little bit differently. So one, this secure connection, which I maybe should have said this on the last slide, is better for collecting things like email. So you'll see things like Facebook CAPI and customer match. We want to start using server side, so we're catching that hashed email through a more secured connection. But then now that I'm kind of understanding users a little better, I can actually start modeling things about them in BigQuery and sending them back to server side while the data's in flight. So let's say I want a customer lifetime value, a propensity model. I want to start engaging with my customers and understanding a little bit more about what data is providing about them so I can tailor the experience of both advertising and messaging back to them. We can actually do that all in BigQuery and send it back to server side before we send data to those platforms. So now we're manipulating the data stream in flight. We can start enriching it. The other obvious example, the shopping cart up there, is like you can do other sales data, but the e-com's an easy one to pick on. If I'm selling a product and the product costs $10, but my margins are actually $8 on that, I do not want the customer to know that. I don't want the customer to know this only costs $2, I'm making $8 in profit. But in server side, you can actually grab that data and send margin data out to the platforms. You would never put that in your data layer. You don't want it to be public. It's a whole thing that you don't want to be sharing that. But now I have the ability to kind of think, well, what data would I put in there that wouldn't be public but is really good for us to make marketing decisions on or analytics decisions on? And you can start enriching things that you would never enrich on the front end. So this is about pulling all of that technology up to a place where we have more processing power, it's more secure, and we can really do a lot more with it. This is a complicated visual. We've got a few minutes left here, so I won't spend too much time on it. The thing that I like to say on this is just my philosophy on how I approach data. What we're talking about with server side here is it is really a first party durable piece that will maximize your collection and can fuel all of these things going down. What I always tell people is please, please, please start at the end. I see the biggest mistake I see people make in their data stacks is they will be like, we got to get the best data collection, and we got to get all that shit in one place. And then we got to think about what's the best model that's going to work for us. And each one of those things becomes these big, large projects that take forever, and you're not getting to the point where you're seeing value with your data. So if you start with what data can we collect to increase conversion rates, how do we get it to somewhere, and what modeling or visualization or analysis is going to help us do this, you can run that play very, very quickly and say, all right, this worked or it didn't work, which is exactly what you want to know before spending many, many, many dollars to get to the end. And you can run this play faster and you'll start seeing incremental gains. And it isn't this big effort to go through. So always start at the end. What is our goal and what is all of this in service of? Server side's role in this is really being that foundational first party piece that's going to increase measurement. So does this actually work? I talked about, hey, we're going to collect a lot more data. Does it actually do that? It really does that. This is a case study put out showing the increase by using CAPI. And I'll reiterate on how this works. I'm not going to go through the numbers. I imagine everyone in here could read. How this works is because we're connecting to the server. The extra data we're collecting, the extra identities we're collecting are places where we have the consent, we are legally allowed to collect this data, but technology was playing a role in blocking our ability to connect this. So the same way I say a first party connection in Pizza Hut, you cannot stop this. A first party connection to ourselves, we cannot stop that data. So we're seeing data we otherwise wouldn't have collected because technology was playing a role in stopping it. So now you're taking ownership of that and saying what data is important to us, we'll send to ourselves and we'll send along to the platforms. And by leveraging that first party connection, they're getting better identities and more data to make better decisions, which is leading to all of this business impact. So here's another case study, this one put out by the people whose lovely room is being shared with us, about value-based bidding. What value-based bidding is getting those real-time modeling data that I talked about from server side into platforms such as SA360 or other advertising platforms where you can make AI-based decisions based off a customer's value. So by looking at what the individual value of this customer is, we can now say, bid lower on them, it's a low value customer, or I'm willing to spend a lot of money on this customer, they're indicative of a customer that will spend a lot of money with me. Generally, we just come to assumptions on what we're willing to bid, but this is using things like propensity and user scoring to fuel those decisions so we can adjust our bids much more intelligently, and it led to the results that you're seeing. So this is a place where that technology thinks about, hey, do I understand who this user is, and is it leveraging me to lean on that first party audience understanding? And make a much better decision about how I should bid against that user, completely automated. Okay, so getting to the end here, this is really all it takes to get started with GTM. If you're excited about this or this sounds interesting and you want to know more, first, you can always reach out to me or anybody in here at InfoTrust to talk about getting started with learning about how you can adopt server-side Google Tag Manager. But really, this is all it takes. So you need a Google Tag Manager container, a client-side Google Tag Manager container, so traditional GTM, a working GA4 implementation. The reason that is it's actually, they've made it easy. If you have GA4 working on your site, that is the data stream that will go to that first-party connection. So what you'll do is you'll take your current GA4 implementation and point it at your new server, and it will forward data along to GA4. So we're just kind of putting a software in the middle of your current data stream, which is what makes it first-party. And this can be deployed anywhere a Docker container can be deployed. For those of you that don't, Google Cloud can work in there. I realize there's some non-technical people who are like, what's a Docker container? Why is he talking about pants? A Docker container is essentially a packaged way to deploy software. So this is true even if you are not a Google Cloud person. We're working in AWS, we're working in Azure, we have on-prem servers. Anywhere that you would think a traditional application can be deployed, server-side GTM can be deployed. All right, that's it.